Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War is an American political action thriller film. It is directed by Andrew Bernstein, and the screenplay is written by Aaron Rabin and John Krasinski, based on a story developed by John Krasinski and Noah Oppenheim. Now, before anything else, you need to understand where this film fits in the bigger picture. This is officially the 6th film in the Jack Ryan franchise and the 3rd reboot of the series. More importantly, it serves as a direct continuation of the Amazon Prime Video television series Jack Ryan, which originally ran from 2018 to 2023. So if you have been following the TV show across all 4 of its seasons, this movie is essentially the next chapter of that same story, now told in feature film format. The film is produced by some major names in Hollywood. Paramount Pictures, Skydance Media, Genre Arts, Push Boot, and Sunday Night Productions are all behind the production. It is distributed by Amazon MGM Studios and released exclusively on Amazon Prime Video. The characters at the heart of this story are all rooted in the legendary fictional universe known as the Ryanverse, which was created by the iconic American novelist Tom Clancy. Clancy's world of intelligence agencies, geopolitical threats, covert operations, and moral complexity has been entertaining audiences for decades across books, films, and television, and Ghost War is the latest entry in that long and celebrated tradition. The film has a runtime of 105 minutes, which makes it a tight, focused, and well-paced spy thriller rather than an overlong and bloated blockbuster. The cinematography is handled by Arnaud Valls-Colomer, the editing is done by Jason Ballantyne, and the music is composed by Ramin Djawadi and William Marriott. Ramin Djawadi is of course a legendary composer best known for his work on Game of Thrones and Westworld, so his involvement alone gives the film a very strong sonic identity and emotional depth. Plot details. Now let us talk about the story. After 4 intense seasons of the television series, Jack Ryan had stepped away from the dangerous world of intelligence and espionage. He had earned his peace, or so he thought. The story of Ghost War begins with Ryan having returned to civilian life, trying to live a quieter existence away from the chaos and moral weight that defined his years as a CIA analyst and field operative. But that quiet life does not last long. His former boss and trusted mentor James Greer tracks him down and pulls him back in. Greer informs Ryan that a CIA contact has gone missing, and that contact was carrying critical intelligence that could have serious consequences if it falls into the wrong hands. Ryan, feeling the weight of duty and loyalty, reluctantly agrees to take on what is initially presented as a relatively straightforward recovery mission. He is pulled back into the world he tried to leave behind. The mission takes Ryan first to Dubai and then to London, 2 of the world's most strategically complex cities, each with its own web of alliances, secrets, and danger. As Ryan begins digging deeper into the situation, it becomes clear very quickly that what was sold to him as a simple mission is anything but. The disappearance of the CIA contact is only the surface layer of something far more sinister. Ryan unravels a deadly and deeply hidden conspiracy that stretches across international borders and involves forces that are difficult to identify and even harder to stop. At the center of this conspiracy is a rogue Black Ops unit, a group of highly trained operatives who have gone off the books and are running their own agenda outside the control of any government or agency. These are not ordinary criminals or foreign adversaries. These are professionals who know exactly how the intelligence world works, which makes them extraordinarily dangerous. Ryan finds himself in a race against time, operating in a world where he cannot fully trust anyone and where every decision could cost lives. To take on this threat, Ryan reunites with 2 of his most trusted allies. Mike November, the sharp and resourceful former CIA station chief who is now working as a private security contractor, joins the fight alongside Ryan. And James Greer, the man who dragged Ryan back into this world, remains a key figure throughout the mission. Adding a new dimension to the team is Emma Marlowe, a sharp and capable MI6 officer based in London who brings British intelligence resources and a different perspective to the operation. Together, this team must work across agency lines and national boundaries to expose the conspiracy and bring down the rogue unit before irreversible damage is done. The story is described as high stakes and deeply personal, which suggests that the threat is not just geopolitical but hits close to home for Ryan himself in ways that go beyond the professional. The film operates with a ticking clock energy, where the pressure builds steadily and the stakes keep escalating as Ryan and his team get closer to the truth. Cast. Now let us talk about the people who bring this story to life. John Krasinski returns in the lead role of Jack Ryan. Krasinski first played this character in the Amazon Prime Video TV series and has made the role entirely his own. He brings a grounded, intelligent, and physically convincing energy to Ryan that sets this version apart from previous portrayals by actors like Alec Baldwin and Harrison Ford. His Ryan is a thinking man's hero, someone who relies as much on his mind as on his physical capability. Wendell Pierce returns as James Greer, the deputy director of the CIA and one of the most important recurring figures in the entire franchise. Pierce brings authority, warmth, and complexity to Greer, making him one of the most compelling supporting characters in the spy genre today. Michael Kelly is back as Mike November, the street-smart and tactically brilliant former CIA station chief turned private contractor. Kelly's November is one of the most entertaining characters from the TV series, and his return in the film is a major draw for fans. Sienna Miller joins the cast as Emma Marlowe, the MI6 officer who becomes a key part of Ryan's team in London. Miller is a highly experienced and versatile actress, and her addition brings a fresh dynamic to the story. Betty Gabriel plays Elizabeth Wright, the director of the CIA, adding another layer of institutional authority and internal tension to the narrative. The supporting cast also includes Max Beesley, Douglas Hodge, J.J. Field, Dominic Mapham as MI6 Chief Arnold, Khalid Laith, and McKenna Bridger among others, all of whom contribute to building the dense and layered world of the film. Release date and platform. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War was released on May 20, 2026, exclusively on Amazon Prime Video. It is available worldwide to all Prime Video subscribers. The film was produced in the United States and is in the English language. Filming took place primarily in London, England, with principal photography beginning in January 2025 and wrapping in late July 2025. So the production had a solid 6 to 7 month shoot, which reflects the scale and ambition of the project. Production and development background. In terms of how the film came together, Amazon MGM Studios announced in late October 2024 that a feature film continuation of the Jack Ryan TV series was in active development. Andrew Bernstein was announced as director, with Aaron Rabin handling the screenplay. John Krasinski was confirmed not just as the star but also as a producer on the project, showing his deep personal investment in the character and the story. Wendell Pierce and Michael Kelly were confirmed to return shortly after. Sienna Miller joined in December 2024, and in February 2025, Betty Gabriel, Max Beesley, Douglas Hodge, and J.J. Field all came on board. The trailer was released in March 2026, generating significant attention from fans of the franchise worldwide. Trailer. The official trailer for Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War dropped in March 2026, and it immediately set the tone for what kind of film this is. The trailer showcases the London setting beautifully, with a lot of intense action sequences, fast cutting, and a sense of urgency that runs throughout. You can see Ryan being pulled back into a world he tried to leave, the tension between old alliances and new threats, and glimpses of the rogue Black Ops unit that serves as the primary antagonist force. The music in the trailer, given Ramin Djawadi's involvement with the score, carries serious weight and amplifies the high-stakes atmosphere. You can search for the official trailer on Amazon Prime Video's YouTube channel. That covers everything you need to know about Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War. This is a film built on years of storytelling, iconic characters, and the rich legacy of Tom Clancy's universe. Whether you are a longtime fan of the TV series or a newcomer to the Jack Ryan world, this movie delivers exactly what the franchise promises: intelligence, action, and the relentless pursuit of truth in a world full of shadows. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War, complete story. A man trying to leave the past behind. The story of Ghost War begins not with action or tension, but with silence. Jack Ryan, one of the most capable and battle-hardened intelligence operatives America has ever produced, is living a quiet and deliberately ordinary civilian life. After 4 grueling seasons of facing down some of the world's most dangerous threats, from Venezuelan cartels to Russian operatives to rogue political figures, Ryan has made the conscious decision to step away. He is no longer with Dr. Kathy Mueller, his long-term partner whose relationship with him could never fully survive the demands of his double life. He is single, working a regular 9-to-5 job, and trying to exist in the world as a normal person rather than as a weapon of the state. He has paid his dues. He has nearly died more times than he can count. And now he simply wants peace. But peace, for Jack Ryan, has never been something the world is willing to grant him for long. Greer comes knocking. James Greer, the deputy director of the CIA and one of the few people in the world that Ryan genuinely trusts, tracks him down. The meeting is not accidental. Greer has been watching and waiting, and he corners Ryan with the kind of quiet authority that only a man who has spent decades in intelligence can project. Greer tells Ryan that he needs him for a small job. Something simple. A loose end that needs tying up. He wants Ryan to travel to Dubai and meet a contact who has information that could be valuable to the CIA. Nothing dangerous, nothing deeply operational. Just a meeting. Ryan is reluctant. He has made his peace with leaving the agency behind and he does not want to be pulled back in. But Greer is persuasive, and somewhere beneath Ryan's resistance is the truth that he has always known about himself. He is not built for a quiet life. The field is where he makes sense of the world. And so, despite his protests and his instincts telling him to walk away, Ryan agrees. He will go to Dubai. He will meet the contact. And then he will come back to his civilian life, and that will be the end of it. It is not the end of it. Dubai, the simple mission falls apart. Ryan arrives in Dubai and links up with Mike November, the former CIA station chief in Venezuela who left the agency after the events of the TV series and has since been working as a private security contractor. November is exactly as Ryan remembers him: sharp, confident, irreverent, and deeply capable. The two of them are comfortable with each other in the way that only people who have survived dangerous situations together can be. What is supposed to be a routine meeting with the CIA contact goes catastrophically wrong almost immediately. Ryan makes contact with the man, but before any meaningful exchange of information can take place, the contact is attacked. In his final moments, he manages to deliver a warning to Ryan: be scared, before his life is violently cut short. The message is chilling in its brevity and its urgency, and Ryan understands instantly that he has walked into something far larger and far more dangerous than Greer led him to believe. What follows is a chase through Dubai. Ryan and November are pursued, the situation becomes hostile, and the two men find themselves arrested by Emma Marlowe, a sharp and experienced MI6 officer based in London who has been tracking the same threads from a very different angle. Emma does not trust Ryan or November immediately. She is professional and guarded, and her loyalty is to British intelligence, not the CIA. But as she begins to explain what she knows, the picture starts to come together in a way that changes everything. The truth about Greer's past. Emma reveals information about James Greer that Ryan did not know, and it forces a confrontation between Ryan and his most trusted mentor. The revelation is this: in the years following the September 11th attacks, when the American and British intelligence communities were operating under enormous pressure to prevent the next catastrophic strike, Greer was involved in the creation of a covert task force called Starling. Starling was not a conventional intelligence unit. It was designed to operate outside the normal boundaries of oversight, accountability, and legal constraint. The idea was simple and brutal. The bureaucratic red tape that governed legitimate intelligence operations was too slow, too cumbersome, and too restrictive to deal with the speed and adaptability of modern terrorist networks. Starling would work by any means necessary to dismantle those networks before they could strike. At the time, it seemed justified. The threat was real, the urgency was genuine, and the men who formed Starling were among the most skilled and committed operatives in the Western intelligence world. But over time, operating without oversight and accountability began to warp the unit. The absence of moral boundaries, once crossed in the name of necessity, became harder and harder to restore. Starling began to pose its own threat to global stability, and Greer, recognizing what he had helped create, made the difficult and courageous decision to shut it down roughly 20 years before the events of the film. The problem is that you cannot simply shut down a group of highly trained, ideologically committed black ops operatives and expect them to accept it quietly. One of those operatives, a decorated British agent named Liam Crown, never accepted the shutdown. Crown was once considered a hero, a man whose commitment to the mission was total and unquestionable. But 2 decades of operating in the shadows, of doing things that governments officially deny and morally cannot justify, had transformed him into something else entirely. He did not accept that Starling was wrong. He believed, with absolute conviction, that Starling was necessary and that Greer had made a catastrophic error in disbanding it. And now, 20 years later, Crown has resurfaced with a plan to prove that point in the most violent and devastating way possible. The antagonist, Liam Crown and his plan? Liam Crown is not simply a rogue agent seeking revenge. His plan is ideological and terrifyingly logical within the framework of his corrupted worldview. Crown intends to restart the world's dormant terrorist cells, to reignite the kind of global terrorist activity that Starling was created to combat, in order to prove that groups like Starling are not just useful but absolutely essential. In his mind, if he can demonstrate that the conventional intelligence apparatus is incapable of dealing with a resurgent global terror threat, governments and agencies will be forced to resurrect exactly the kind of unconstrained black ops unit he helped build. He is willing to cause enormous destruction and take countless lives to make this ideological point. He is not trying to win a war. He is trying to prove that the war never ended and never can end without people like him fighting it on his terms. Crown has also been systematically hunting and killing intelligence agents connected to the original Starling shutdown, taunting Greer in the process. He is sending a message that Greer's decision had consequences and that Crown intends to hold him personally responsible for them. This makes the conflict deeply personal for Greer in a way that goes beyond professional duty. This is about the choices he made decades ago coming back to destroy everything he has spent his career trying to build and protect. Tensions within the team. The revelation of Greer's role in creating Starling creates a fracture between Ryan and his mentor. Ryan's entire worldview is built on the belief that there are lines that cannot and should not be crossed, that the moral framework which separates legitimate intelligence work from terrorism is not a bureaucratic inconvenience but a fundamental necessity. Learning that Greer helped build an organization that operated with complete disregard for those lines makes Ryan question whether he can trust the man he has always looked to as a moral anchor. This tension runs through the middle section of the film and gives it a personal, emotional dimension beyond the tactical and operational. Ryan is not just trying to stop a dangerous enemy. He is trying to reconcile his understanding of who Greer is with the complicated and uncomfortable truth of what Greer once did. Greer, for his part, does not deny it. He does not make excuses. He acknowledges what Starling was and why he ultimately shut it down, and he asks Ryan to trust that the man who made the decision to end it is the same man standing in front of him now. Mike November, ever perceptive beneath his easy charm, puts it in the most direct terms during a private conversation with Greer. He points out that beneath all the disagreements and moral debates that define the relationship between Ryan and Greer, a deeper truth exists. The three of them, Ryan, Greer, and November, are the only genuine family any of them will ever truly have. Whatever the past holds, whatever the complications, the bond between them is real, and it is what will see them through. The traitor inside MI6. As the team digs deeper into Starling's network and Crown's operation, they uncover a devastating piece of intelligence. Andrew Spear, a senior figure within MI6 itself, Emma Marlowe's own organization, has been working as an inside man for Crown and Starling. His position within British intelligence has given Crown exactly the kind of institutional cover and advance warning that has allowed Starling to stay ahead of the agencies hunting them. For Emma, this discovery is a personal betrayal as much as a professional one. She has been operating within a system that has been compromised from within, and the information she thought was secure has been feeding directly to the enemy. The exposure of Spear as a traitor gives the team a crucial advantage. It means they now understand how Crown has been staying one step ahead, and it means they can cut off that intelligence pipeline and begin to gain ground in the race to stop him. Crown escalates, the death of Director Wright. Before the team can fully consolidate their advantage, Crown strikes in a way that changes the entire scale of the conflict. A car bomb, intended for Greer himself, detonates and kills CIA Director Elizabeth Wright instead. Wright, who had been the institutional authority over both Greer and the entire operation, is gone. The death is shocking, sudden, and deeply consequential. It removes the organizational structure above Greer at exactly the moment when operational clarity is most needed, and it raises the personal stakes enormously. Crown is not playing defensively. He is willing to assassinate senior intelligence figures, and he came within a margin of killing Greer himself. The death of Wright creates a leadership vacuum within the CIA and adds an additional layer of urgency to everything. The mission is no longer just about stopping a rogue operative. It is about preventing a power vacuum from being exploited, maintaining institutional stability, and ensuring that Crown does not get the global chaos he is deliberately trying to engineer. The Dubai skyscraper, the final confrontation. The climax of the film takes place in Dubai, inside a skyscraper connected to a man named Nigel, who holds Starling's intelligence network on his servers. Ryan, November, and Emma move to breach the building, fight their way through Starling's forces, and reach Nigel's server room to upload Starling's complete intelligence network to the CIA. If they can get the data, they can identify every remaining Starling operative, every cell, every asset, and dismantle the organization completely and permanently. The firefight inside the skyscraper is intense and costly. Emma is shot during the confrontation, wounded badly enough that her continued involvement in the mission becomes a genuine concern. Ryan, operating under pressure from every direction, pushes through. With the help of CIA contact Patrick Klinghoffer, Ryan manages to reach the server room and successfully complete the upload. Starling's network is now in CIA hands. But Crown is there. And he is not done. Crown confronts Ryan in what amounts to the film's most personal and violent moment, and nearly succeeds in killing him. He is not simply an enemy to be neutralized. He is the physical embodiment of everything Ryan has been fighting throughout the film, the argument that the ends justify the means, that moral limits are weaknesses, that men like him are necessary, and that men like Ryan are naive. Their confrontation is therefore not just physical but philosophical. Greer's team arrives and guns down the remaining Starling forces from a helicopter, breaking the tactical stalemate. But it is Ryan who delivers the final blow. Crown, mortally wounded, is still alive. And Ryan, in a moment that marks his own evolution as a character, makes the cold and deliberate decision to execute him. It is not a moment of rage or desperation. It is a measured choice, and in making it, Ryan demonstrates that he has crossed a threshold. He is capable of making the hard decisions that the position of deputy director will require of him. He is no longer just a field operative following orders. He is someone who can be the tip of the spear, as Greer always believed he could be. The aftermath and the new beginning. With Crown dead and Starling neutralized, the consequences begin to settle into place. Andrew Spear, the MI6 traitor who gave Crown his inside access, is exposed, and the intelligence that Ryan's team uploaded from Nigel's server gives the CIA the tools to completely dismantle whatever remains of Starling's international network. The conspiracy that began with a CIA contact dying in Dubai with a single word of warning has been fully uncovered and destroyed. Elizabeth Wright's death means that the CIA needs new leadership. James Greer steps into the role of acting director, taking the position at the top of one of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies. And in one of the film's most meaningful gestures, Greer uses his authority to nominate Jack Ryan for the position of Deputy Director of the CIA, formally recommending him to the President of the United States. Ryan accepts. In the film's closing moments, we see Ryan and Greer dressed in suits, heading together toward a government office, presumably to meet the president and formalize the new structure. It is a moment that mirrors a famous scene from the Tom Clancy novels themselves, where a version of Greer nominated a version of Ryan for the same position in clear and present danger. The franchise has come full circle, placing its two central characters in the iconic institutional roles that Clancy always envisioned for them. Mike November, whose complicated status as a private contractor has hung over him throughout the film, is also brought formally back into the CIA fold, with Greer using his new authority to reinstate him officially. The team that fought through Dubai and London together is now operating as a legitimate and powerful unit at the heart of American intelligence. What the ending means. The conclusion of Ghost War is not just an ending. It is a transformation. Jack Ryan, who began the film as a man who had consciously chosen to walk away from the world of intelligence, ends it as one of the most powerful intelligence figures in the United States government. His journey through this film has not just been about stopping Liam Crown. It has been about understanding what kind of man he is and what his place in the world truly is. He cannot be ordinary. He cannot be quiet. He is too capable, too committed, and too morally driven to sit on the sidelines while the world burns. The friendship between Ryan and Greer, strained almost to breaking point by the revelations about Starling, has emerged stronger and more honest than it has ever been before. They understand each other more completely now, including the parts that are uncomfortable and complicated. And that honesty, that willingness to look at each other clearly and still choose loyalty, is what makes their partnership at the top of the CIA something genuinely formidable. John Krasinski himself, in interviews following the release, made clear that he is open to continuing the franchise in movie format, stating that the shift from television series to feature film allows for different kinds of stories to be told, and that there are more stories worth telling. Whether Ghost War is a standalone conclusion or the beginning of a new chapter in the Jack Ryan film franchise remains to be seen. But what is certain is that it leaves Jack Ryan standing at the center of American intelligence, with the tools, the authority, and the moral clarity to face whatever comes next. John Krasinski, the man behind Jack Ryan. John Burke Krasinski was born on October 20, 1979, in Newton, Massachusetts, a quiet suburban city just outside Boston. He grew up in a close-knit family with two older brothers, Kevin and Paul. His father Ronald Krasinski is a physician of Polish descent, and his mother Mary Claire is a nurse with Irish roots. What makes the family particularly remarkable is the sheer physical stature. Krasinski, standing at 6 feet 3 inches, is actually the shortest of the three brothers. His siblings tower at 6 feet 6 and 6 feet 10 inches respectively, making family gatherings look like something out of a basketball recruitment event. From a very early age, Krasinski showed a natural pull toward performance. His first taste of the spotlight came in 6th grade when he played the role of Daddy Warbucks in his school's production of Annie. It was a small beginning, but it planted something in him that never left. During his high school years at Newton South High School, he was not just artistically inclined but also a serious and competitive athlete, excelling in both basketball and soccer. He was a well-rounded young man in every sense, equally comfortable on a stage and on a sports field. It was also during high school that he crossed paths with someone who would later become a defining figure in his professional life. A classmate named B.J. Novak cast him in a satirical play he had written and directed. Neither of them could have known at the time that they would one day work side by side as co-stars on one of the most beloved television comedies in American history. After graduating high school, Krasinski enrolled at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, where he pursued a degree in English literature. Brown was a transformative experience for him, not just academically but in terms of how he began to understand storytelling and human character. He also took the significant step of attending the National Theatre Institute, and trained with the Royal Shakespeare Company during this period, which gave him a classical foundation in theatrical performance that he would carry throughout his entire career. These were not just extracurricular pursuits. They were the building blocks of a serious craft. He graduated from Brown in 2001 and, like so many ambitious young actors before him, made his way to New York City with dreams that were considerably larger than his bank account. The reality of New York quickly set in. He worked as a waiter to pay his bills, picking up shifts while simultaneously going out on auditions, doing readings of off-Broadway plays, and appearing in commercials wherever he could land them. He also interned as a scriptwriter on Late Night with Conan O'Brien during this period, which gave him his first real professional exposure to the television industry from behind the camera. It was a grind, as it is for nearly every actor who tries to build a career from the ground up in that city, and there were moments when Krasinski genuinely considered walking away from it all to pursue a career in teaching. That decision, had he made it, would have robbed the world of one of its most gifted contemporary performers. Instead, he kept going. He landed small guest appearances on television shows and continued to build his resume piece by piece. And then came the audition that changed everything. He was called in to read for a new NBC comedy being adapted from the British series The Office. The show was helmed by Greg Daniels, and the character Krasinski was auditioning for was Jim Halpert, a paper salesman at the Dunder Mifflin Company in Scranton, Pennsylvania, who was charming, intelligent, deeply funny, and secretly in love with the receptionist at his office. Krasinski got the part, and The Office premiered in 2005. What followed was 9 seasons of television that became a genuine cultural phenomenon. Jim Halpert was beloved by audiences across America and around the world in a way that very few television characters ever achieve. Krasinski brought to the role an extraordinary naturalism, a quality of ease and warmth that made viewers feel as though Jim was a real person they genuinely knew rather than a character on a scripted show. His chemistry with his co-stars, particularly with Jenna Fisher who played Pam Beesly, was some of the most genuine and affecting romantic storytelling that American television has ever produced. The show earned Krasinski Screen Actors Guild Award nominations for Outstanding Performance by an Ensemble in a Comedy Series for 4 consecutive years between 2006 and 2009. He was no longer just a struggling actor working tables in New York. He was a star. Even while The Office was at the peak of its popularity, Krasinski was quietly and purposefully building a parallel career in film. He appeared in Jarhead in 2005, followed by supporting roles in various projects, and began demonstrating an ambition that extended well beyond playing a charming office worker. He starred in License to Wed, It's Complicated, Something Borrowed, and Away We Go, exploring different tones and genres. But the most significant evolution in his career came when he stepped behind the camera for the first time as a writer and director. He wrote and directed Brief Interviews with Hideous Men in 2009, a bold and experimental literary adaptation that signaled clearly that his creative vision was not limited to performance. The transformation of Krasinski the comedian into Krasinski the action hero and filmmaker came with a project that shocked almost everyone who thought they had him figured out. In 2018, he wrote, directed, and starred in A Quiet Place, a science fiction horror film that was made on a budget of approximately $17 million and went on to earn over $300 million at the global box office. The film was a sensation. Critics praised it as one of the most inventive and emotionally powerful horror films in years, a masterpiece of tension and silent storytelling. Krasinski co-starred in the film with his real-life wife, Emily Blunt, and their on-screen chemistry carried a genuine emotional weight that elevated the film from genre entertainment to something deeply affecting. A Quiet Place established Krasinski as a major filmmaker as well as a major actor, and it entirely rewrote how Hollywood perceived him. His marriage to Emily Blunt is one of the most genuinely admired partnerships in the entertainment industry. The two met through mutual friends and married on July 10, 2010. They have two daughters together, Hazel, born in 2014, and Violet, born in 2016. Krasinski and Blunt have spoken openly and repeatedly about how they navigate the demands of two enormously successful careers while prioritizing their family life and their relationship with each other. They are widely regarded in Hollywood as a couple who have managed to build something real and lasting in an industry where such things are notoriously difficult to maintain. By relationship, Krasinski is also connected to Stanley Tucci, the celebrated actor, who is married to Emily Blunt's sister Felicity Blunt, making them brothers-in-law. During the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown of 2020, Krasinski launched a web series called Some Good News in which he highlighted uplifting and positive stories from around the world at a time when fear and uncertainty dominated daily life. The series became a genuine phenomenon, watched by millions of people seeking light during one of the darkest collective experiences of modern times. To celebrate his 40th birthday in 2019, he helped raise more than $500,000 for Family Reach, an organization that provides financial support to families fighting cancer. His philanthropic instincts are as genuine as his professional ambitions. As of 2026, Krasinski's estimated net worth stands at around $80 million, a figure accumulated through decades of acting, directing, producing, and a series of extraordinarily smart professional decisions. His portrayal of Jack Ryan across the Amazon Prime Video series and now the Ghost War film has cemented him as one of the defining action intelligence heroes of his generation. He has taken a character previously played by Alec Baldwin and Harrison Ford and made it entirely his own, bringing an intellectual depth and physical credibility to the role that honors the legacy of Tom Clancy's creation, while pushing it forward into new territory. Wendell Pierce, the architecture of James Greer. Wendell Edward Pierce was born on December 8, 1963, in New Orleans, Louisiana, one of the most culturally rich and historically complex cities in the United States. He grew up in a neighborhood called Pontchartrain Park, which holds a significant place in the history of African American life in New Orleans. The neighborhood was largely developed by his father and other black veterans who returned from World War II and, finding the existing suburban landscape closed to them by the racial segregation of the era, built their own community. Pierce's father was a maintenance engineer and a veteran, and his mother was a teacher. Growing up surrounded by that history of dignity, resilience, and communal achievement gave Pierce a foundation that would define not just his character but his understanding of what storytelling and representation could mean. He was a gifted student from an early age, and his path through education was remarkable in its ambition. During his high school years, he attended both Benjamin Franklin High School in the mornings and the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts in the afternoons simultaneously, a demanding schedule that reflected both his intellectual capacity and his artistic drive. At the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, he was recognized as the Presidential Scholar of the Arts, an honor that placed him among the most talented young artists in the state. His classmates at the center included individuals who would go on to become giants in American music: Wynton Marsalis, Branford Marsalis, Harry Connick Jr., and Terence Blanchard all walked those same hallways. The concentration of talent in that institution was extraordinary, and Pierce absorbed the seriousness and discipline of that environment completely. After graduating from both institutions in 1981, he moved to New York City and enrolled in the Juilliard School's prestigious drama division, one of the most demanding and competitive conservatory programs for performing arts in the entire world. Juilliard does not simply teach actors to memorize lines and hit marks. It builds them from the inside out, developing technique, range, physical awareness, vocal control, and a rigorous understanding of text and character. Pierce spent 4 years there, graduating in 1985 as part of Group 14 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree with a major in drama. The training he received at Juilliard gave him a technical mastery that would allow him to move between classical theater, contemporary drama, comedy, and everything in between with complete confidence. His professional career began immediately after graduation. He made his Broadway debut in The Boys of Winter in 1985, followed by Carol Churchill's Serious Money in 1988. He also performed in the national tour of Duke Ellington's folk opera Queenie Pie in 1986, and his off-Broadway work included celebrated productions of The Cherry Orchard and Waiting for Godot, two of the most demanding plays in the theatrical canon. His early screen appearances were modest. A minor role as a paramedic in the 1986 film The Money Pit marked his on-screen debut, followed by small parts in Casualties of War and other projects. He was building his career methodically, brick by brick, with the patience of a man who had been trained to think in terms of the long arc rather than the immediate breakthrough. The breakthrough came, eventually and powerfully, in the form of HBO's The Wire. Premiering in 2002 and running until 2008, The Wire is widely considered by critics and scholars to be one of the greatest television dramas ever produced anywhere in the world. Set in Baltimore, Maryland, the show examined the drug trade, law enforcement, education, journalism, and politics with a novelistic depth and sociological honesty that had never been attempted in American television before. Pierce played Detective Bunk Moreland, a homicide detective who was at once deeply cynical and genuinely committed to justice, capable of profound warmth and blunt cruelty, a man who consumed whiskey and carried the weight of a broken city with equal ease. Bunk Moreland was one of the finest performances in the entire show, which is saying something extraordinary given the caliber of the ensemble. The role established Pierce as one of the most formidable character actors of his generation. Following The Wire, Pierce continued to build on that foundation. He played the trombonist Antoine Batiste in HBO's Dream, a deeply personal project set in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in his hometown of New Orleans. For Pierce, this role was more than professional. Katrina had devastated the city he loved, and the neighborhood where he grew up, Pontchartrain Park, was flooded and left in ruins. He threw himself not just into the performance but into the real-world effort to rebuild his community, co-founding the Pontchartrain Park Community Development Corporation to construct affordable and environmentally sustainable homes for Katrina victims. He also co-founded a chain of grocery stores called Sterling Farms specifically to provide fresh food and produce to underserved communities in New Orleans who had been left without reliable access to basic necessities by the storm and its aftermath. Fast Company magazine recognized his contributions by naming him one of the 100 most creative people in business in 2013. He is not an actor who separates his public life from his civic responsibilities. He lives them as a single continuous commitment. He played the attorney Robert Zane in the legal drama Suits from 2013 to 2019, and his dramatic range was further demonstrated when he took on the lead role of Willy Loman in a 2019 West End revival of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman at the Piccadilly Theatre in London. Willy Loman is one of the most demanding roles in all of American drama, a character whose psychological unraveling requires an actor of extraordinary emotional depth and technical precision. Pierce's performance earned him a nomination for the Laurence Olivier Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role in a Play, one of the most prestigious honors in all of theater. He also portrayed the young Clarence Thomas in the HBO film Confirmation in 2016, bringing his characteristic precision and intelligence to a deeply complicated historical figure. His role as James Greer in Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, which he has now carried across the full television series and into the Ghost War film, has given him his most sustained and perhaps most beloved television character since Bunk Moreland. Greer is a man of authority, moral complexity, institutional wisdom, and genuine human vulnerability, and Pierce brings all of those qualities to the surface with an effortlessness that only comes from decades of deep craft. He has made Greer one of the most compelling figures in the spy genre, a man whose presence commands every room he enters and whose history gives the entire Jack Ryan world its emotional foundation. Michael Kelly, the quiet intensity behind Mike November. Michael Joseph Kelly was born on May 22, 1969, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, though he was raised primarily in Lawrenceville, Georgia, a suburb outside Atlanta. His father Michael Kelly Sr. is of Irish descent and his mother Maureen is of Italian ancestry, a combination that gave Kelly his distinctly sharp, intense features and the kind of brooding presence that would later serve him well in playing morally complicated characters. He grew up with two sisters, Shannon and Casey, and one brother Andrew, in a family environment that was warm but not particularly connected to the entertainment industry. Kelly attended Brookwood High School in Snellville, Georgia, where he was an athletic and engaged student with broad interests. After graduating, he enrolled at Coastal Carolina University in South Carolina with every intention of studying law. He was serious about it, not merely going through the motions but genuinely focused on a legal career. But then he took an elective acting class, almost as an afterthought, as students often do to fill out a course schedule. That class changed the entire direction of his life. Something clicked for him inside those rehearsal rooms and performance spaces, a recognition that this was not just something he was good at but something he needed to do. He switched his major to performing arts and graduated from Coastal Carolina in 1992 with a degree in that field, a decision that cost him nothing except the legal career he had planned and gave him everything that followed. After graduating, Kelly moved to New York and committed himself to the long and difficult work of building an acting career from the foundation up. He became a lifetime member of the Actors Studio, the legendary institution founded in 1947 that counts Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, Paul Newman, and Dustin Hoffman among its members and alumni. Membership in the Actors Studio is not simply a credential. It is a commitment to a specific approach to performance, deeply psychological, rigorously internal, focused on authentic human truth rather than technical surface. That commitment shaped everything Kelly did on screen from that point forward. He spent the 1990s doing what serious stage-trained actors do in New York, building a body of work through smaller television roles and film appearances while developing his craft in theater. His early screen credits included a role in the television film Life Stories, Families in Crisis in 1994, and he continued to accumulate experience through small parts in various productions. His film career began to gain traction in the early 2000s with a role in the horror remake Dawn of the Dead in 2004, directed by Zack Snyder. The film was a significant commercial success and gave Kelly his first genuinely wide audience exposure. He appeared in a memorable supporting capacity on The Sopranos as FBI agent Ron Goddard, one of the most celebrated dramatic series in television history, and his work on that show introduced him to a new tier of the industry. He continued to develop his film career with appearances in Changeling, directed by Clint Eastwood and starring Angelina Jolie, as well as the biographical drama Invincible alongside Mark Wahlberg. Each role added dimension to his reputation as a performer who brought something genuine and unsettling to his work, a quality that made him particularly effective at playing men who operated in morally gray spaces. The defining breakthrough of his career came when he was cast as Doug Stamper in the Netflix political drama House of Cards, which premiered in 2013. Doug Stamper was the chief of staff and deeply loyal fixer to Frank Underwood, the ruthlessly ambitious politician played by Kevin Spacey. Stamper was one of the most psychologically complex characters in the entire show, a recovering alcoholic whose devotion to Underwood bordered on something beyond professional loyalty, a man capable of acts of extraordinary violence committed in the service of a man he seemed to worship with a fervor that was almost religious. Kelly played him with a stillness and a controlled intensity that was genuinely terrifying. The performance earned him 4 Primetime Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series across the run of the show, a remarkable recognition of sustained excellence in a role that required him to access some very dark psychological territory every single time he stepped in front of a camera. In his personal life, Kelly has been married to his wife Karen since 2005, and the couple has 2 children. He is notably private about his family, maintaining a separation between his public professional identity and his domestic life that is increasingly rare in the era of social media transparency. Beyond acting, he is a genuine musician and for a time played guitar in a rock band called Leary Justice, which he named after a college friend's father. He is also notably athletic and has spoken about the physical discipline he maintains as part of his overall approach to staying prepared for the demands of the roles he takes on. His work as Mike November in Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan across the full series and now in Ghost War has given him a character that stands as a deliberate contrast to his earlier screen persona. Where Doug Stamper was internalized, silent, and deeply menacing, Mike November is outwardly charming, sharp-tongued, and aggressively likable. Kelly navigates the character's complexity with the kind of skill that only a deeply trained actor possesses, making November funny and dangerous at the same time, a man whose easy manner conceals a tactical mind and a moral seriousness that surfaces when the stakes genuinely demand it. Sienna Miller, the range and resilience of Emma Marlowe. Sienna Rose Diana Miller was born on December 28, 1981, in New York City, New York, though her connection to New York was brief. Her father, Edwin Miller, was an American banker who later became a Chinese art dealer, and her mother Josefina, known as Jo, was a South African-born former model who had once worked as a personal assistant to David Bowie and had run the Lee Strasberg Theatre and Film Institute in New York City. When Sienna was just 18 months old, the family relocated to London, England, and it was there that she grew up and developed her identity. She attended Heathfield School, a boarding school in Ascot, Berkshire, where she took her first formal theatre classes and discovered a serious and genuine passion for performance. When her parents divorced in 1985, she moved to Parson Green in London with her mother. She has a sister named Savannah, who became a fashion designer, and 2 half-brothers named Charles and Stephen. Her mother's connection to the world of arts and performance shaped Miller's relationship with creativity from her earliest years, and the artistic seriousness of that household gave her a cultural fluency that would later serve her enormously in the kinds of complex, nuanced roles she would choose to pursue. After completing her schooling in England, Miller attended the Lee Strasberg Theatre and Film Institute in New York City for a year, training in the method approach to acting that had shaped generations of American performers before her. This training, combined with her natural intelligence and instinct for character, gave her a technical foundation that went deeper than the modeling career she was simultaneously building during the same period. And that modeling career was considerable. She signed with major agencies and appeared in campaigns for Coca-Cola and Italian Vogue, and she posed for the prestigious 2003 Pirelli calendar. She was closely associated with the boho chic aesthetic of the early 2000s, a relaxed and effortlessly stylish approach to fashion that became enormously influential in that era and positioned her as a genuine fashion figure, as well as a performer. Her acting career began in earnest with a small role in the romantic comedy South Kensington in 2001, which starred Rupert Everett and Elle Macpherson. She also appeared in the BBC drama comedy Bedtime during this period, which began to attract attention for her and led to a contract with Paramount Pictures. She was cast in the Fox action drama series Keen Eddie in 2003, playing Fiona Bickerton, a role that gave her her first sustained television exposure to an American audience. The show was cancelled after 13 episodes, but the work had been noticed. The pivotal year in Miller's early career was 2004, when two films released in quick succession fundamentally repositioned her in the industry. She starred alongside Daniel Craig in the British crime thriller Layer Cake, a stylish and intelligent film that showed she could hold her own in demanding dramatic company. And she starred opposite Jude Law in the remake of the Michael Caine classic Alfie, playing one of the young women in his complicated orbit. The film attracted enormous attention, but some of that attention had nothing to do with the performance itself. Miller's personal relationship with Law became tabloid fodder of the most intense kind, particularly when Law's infidelity became public. Miller found herself in the uncomfortable position of having her private life overwhelm the conversation about her professional work, a dynamic she handled with remarkable dignity but which also gave her an insight into the darker dimensions of celebrity that many performers never fully have to confront. She continued to work through it all with discipline and purpose. She starred as Andy Warhol's muse Edie Sedgwick in Factory Girl in 2006, a biopic that drew genuine critical attention and allowed her to demonstrate a depth of performance that went well beyond what tabloid coverage had suggested she was capable of. The following year she made her West End stage debut in Shakespeare's As You Like It at Wyndham's Theatre in London, playing Celia, a choice that reflected her determination to be taken seriously as a stage actress as well as a screen presence. She appeared in the action blockbuster G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra in 2009, bringing her a genuinely global blockbuster audience while simultaneously developing her more serious work. Her portrayal of Tippi Hedren in the television film The Girl in 2012 earned her a BAFTA nomination and substantial critical respect. She appeared in Foxcatcher in 2014 alongside Steve Carell and Channing Tatum, and in Clint Eastwood's American Sniper in 2014 alongside Bradley Cooper, playing the wife of Chris Kyle. The American Sniper performance was quietly one of the most affecting in the entire film, bringing a stillness and genuine emotional complexity to a role that could easily have been underwritten, and it reached an audience of tens of millions of people. She later received a Screen Actors Guild Award nomination as part of the Foxcatcher ensemble, solidifying the critical recognition that her work had been consistently earning even when broader audiences were not always catching up to what the more discerning observers were seeing. In her personal life, Miller has been both very public about certain relationships and fiercely protective of others. Her relationship with Jude Law from 2003 to 2006 was one of the most tabloid-saturated romances of the decade. She was engaged to the actor Balthazar Getty at one point, and she has a daughter named Marlo, born in 2012, with actor Tom Sturridge, to whom she was engaged before they separated. She welcomed a second child in 2023. Through all of it, she has maintained a clarity about her priorities that speaks to a resilience not always visible in the performances themselves but present in every professional choice she has made. Her joining the cast of Ghost War as Emma Marlowe, the MI6 officer who becomes an essential part of Jack Ryan's team, is entirely consistent with the trajectory of a career that has always sought out complexity, intelligence, and genuine dramatic substance. Miller brings to the role a specifically British assurance and a quality of watchful intelligence that makes Emma Marlowe credible in every scene she inhabits. She is not a background presence. She is a force, and the film is richer for having her in it. The budget and the behind-the-scenes world of Jack Ryan, Ghost War. Let us start where the movie literally starts, with money. Because before a single frame of Ghost War was captured on camera, before John Krasinski put on that Jack Ryan face for the first time in a movie theater format, someone had to sign a very large check. And that check was not small. Jack Ryan, Ghost War was made with a reported production budget of $100 million. Let that number sit for a moment. $100 million to make a spy thriller for a streaming platform. That is a genuinely enormous figure, especially when you consider that A Quiet Place, the horror masterpiece that John Krasinski wrote and directed and which essentially rewrote Hollywood's perception of what he was capable of, was made for just $17 million. Ghost War cost roughly 6 times that amount. This is the scale of the ambition that Amazon MGM Studios, Paramount Pictures, and Skydance Media collectively committed to when they decided that the Jack Ryan franchise deserved a cinematic upgrade. So where does $100 million go when you are making a spy thriller? The answer becomes very clear when you look at what the film actually involved. Principal photography ran from January 2025 all the way through late July 2025, a full 6 to 7 months of shooting. That is an extraordinarily long production schedule for a film that runs only 105 minutes. It tells you immediately that what was being captured was not simple or cheap. Every single day of a major Hollywood production at this budget level costs an enormous amount of money once you factor in crew salaries, equipment hire, location fees, catering, transport, insurance, stunt teams, and the dozens of other line items that accumulate on a production of this scale. The film was shot primarily on location in London, England, with additional sequences filmed in Dubai and New York City. Filming on location in any major world city is dramatically more expensive than building sets on a studio back lot, and London is one of the most expensive cities on the planet in which to operate a large film production. Closing streets for car chases, hiring local support crews, navigating the bureaucracy of filming in historic and heavily trafficked areas of one of the world's most visited cities. All of that costs money at every single step. The London car chase sequence that features prominently in the film required months and months of planning, according to director Andrew Bernstein himself, and that planning time translates directly into budget expenditure before a single stunt driver even starts an engine. The Dubai sequences presented their own set of financial demands. Filming inside a real skyscraper in one of the world's most expensive and logistically complex cities, staging a speedboat chase across Dubai Marina, coordinating large-scale action sequences with international stunt teams. This is not the kind of work you do on a budget. Dubai as a location brings with it significant costs in terms of international crew travel, accommodation, location permissions, and the sheer logistical complexity of moving an entire film production from one continent to another mid-shoot. The film also shot briefly in New York, where the opening sequence of Ryan jogging through the city and then realizing he is being followed was captured on location, adding another expensive city to the location list. Then there is the stunt work itself, which is a major cost center on any action film and an enormous one on a project of this ambition. The London car chase alone, described by the director as super difficult to shoot and super gratifying when achieved, involved professional stunt drivers, multiple camera rigs, specialized vehicles, the cooperation of London's city authorities, extensive pre-production rehearsals, and a stunt coordinator named Lee Morrison who had to choreograph the whole thing with military precision. The boat chase in Dubai involved similar coordination on the water. The skyscraper firefight sequence required weeks of rehearsal between Krasinski, Kelly, Miller, and their stunt doubles, with safety protocols, wire rigging, and carefully controlled pyrotechnics adding exponentially to the cost at every stage. The music score, composed by Ramin Djawadi and William Marriott, represents another significant budget consideration. Djawadi is one of the most sought-after composers in the industry, famous for his game-changing scores for Game of Thrones and Westworld, and his involvement commands fees that reflect his status. A full orchestral score recorded with live musicians in a professional scoring stage adds another layer of expense that smaller productions simply cannot afford. The visual effects work, the cinematography by Arnaud Valls-Colomer shot in the HDR and UHD formats available on Prime Video, and the months of post-production editing, color grading, and sound design all contributed to where that $100 million figure went. And then there are the actors themselves. John Krasinski is not just the star of this film. He is one of the producers, one of the co-writers of the screenplay, and one of the architects of the entire creative vision. His compensation reflects all of those roles. Wendell Pierce, Michael Kelly, and Sienna Miller are all established and proven names with significant leverage, and their contracts for a $100 million streaming event picture would reflect their value accordingly. The entire ensemble, from the lead cast down through supporting players like Betty Gabriel, Max Beasley, Douglas Hodge, and J.J. Field, represents a payroll that alone could constitute a significant portion of many smaller films' entire budgets. Despite the enormous investment, the film hit number 1 on Amazon Prime Video immediately upon its release on May 20, 2026, demonstrating that the platform's confidence in the project was not misplaced from an audience engagement standpoint. Whether Amazon considers the investment a full commercial success by their internal metrics is a different question, but the immediate streaming performance validated the decision to bet big on this franchise continuation. Now let us talk about something a lot more entertaining than spreadsheets. Let us talk about what it is actually like when John Krasinski, Wendell Pierce, and Michael Kelly are on the same set together. Because here is the thing that you need to understand about this particular group of people. John Krasinski spent 9 years of his life playing Jim Halpert, the greatest office prankster in television history. The man built his entire early career identity around being the guy who looks directly at the camera with barely suppressed delight, while his colleague is trapped in jello. He is genetically encoded for mischief. You do not spend nearly a decade executing elaborate pranks on Rainn Wilson on national television and then arrive on a serious spy thriller set and simply turn that off. That is not how human beings work. The dynamic between Krasinski and Michael Kelly in real life is the exact opposite of what you might expect given the intensity of the characters they play. In interviews and public appearances around Ghost War, Kelly has been notably enthusiastic and relaxed, talking about the genuine fun of playing Mike November in the movie format compared to the television series. Kelly, who spent years playing the deeply dark and internally tormented Doug Stamper on House of Cards, clearly finds Mike November a kind of creative vacation, a character whose wit and charm give him room to breathe and laugh in a way that Stamper never allowed. And the chemistry between him and Krasinski, built over years of working together on the television series, is the kind of easy and genuinely affectionate rapport that cannot be manufactured. Krasinski himself has always been remarkably candid about the fact that laughter is his default mode on set. During his years on The Office, he famously had to excuse himself from certain scenes entirely because he could not stop laughing. There is a legendary Christmas episode scene from season 6 called Secret Santa in which Brian Baumgartner's Kevin sits on Steve Carell's Santa-costumed Michael Scott's lap and slowly, solemnly works through his Christmas wish list. This scene is considered one of the funniest ever filmed for the show, and Krasinski has freely admitted that he refused to participate in any reaction shots because he absolutely knew there was no way he was going to make it through a single take without completely losing it. He described this as the hardest he has ever laughed in his entire life. He simply walked away from the set and let the scene happen without him, because the alternative was destroying every usable take in the building. That is the level of person we are dealing with. His relationship with Steve Carell, his Office co-star and real-life close friend, has consistently been one of mutual and uncontrollable amusement. There is a well-documented blooper reel from The Office in which Carell's improvisational instincts trigger 8 consecutive minutes of genuine, completely uncontrollable laughter from Krasinski. Not polite actor laughter. The full, wheezing, bent double variety. The kind where you have to walk out of frame and compose yourself before anyone can get anything done. Krasinski has stated in interviews that his favorite thing about working on The Office for 9 years was the laughing. Not the awards, not the recognition, not the career trajectory it created. The laughing. With those specific people. That tells you a great deal about who he is when the cameras are not rolling. He also, famously and freely admitted, stole the Dunder Mifflin sign from the Office set on the final day of production. He had apparently been telling the show's co-creator Greg Daniels for years that he did not take it. Then, on a podcast years later, he just casually confessed that he absolutely did steal it, and had been lying about it this entire time. He keeps it as a personal memento. This is the man playing the morally upright, justice-driven Jack Ryan. The very same Jack Ryan who lectures intelligence agencies about ethical lines and the importance of doing things the right way. The Dunder Mifflin sign is in his house. On the Ghost War set specifically, director Andrew Bernstein has spoken openly about the genuine electricity of working with Krasinski and Pierce together. Bernstein described a scene in an MI6 conference room where the two actors have a direct confrontational exchange about Greer's past and Ryan's ability to trust him, and he recounted watching the scene being filmed and being genuinely blown away by the level of performance he was witnessing. But what made it extraordinary was not just the dramatic quality. It was the fact that these two men have known each other and worked together long enough that they understand each other's rhythms completely. Pierce, trained at Juilliard and shaped by decades of stage and screen work, brings a classical precision to his performance that Krasinski's more instinctive and physical approach bounces off in fascinating and unexpected ways. Between takes, according to those who were present, the mood shifted completely from the intensity of the scene into something considerably more relaxed. Pierce is known for his warmth and his humor, and the camaraderie between him, Krasinski, and Kelly on set was described as one of the genuinely great pleasures of the entire production. Michael Kelly himself, in interviews about Ghost War, talked about the fun of playing Mike November in this movie format with visible enthusiasm. Kelly is someone who approaches acting with a musician's sensibility. He spent time playing guitar in a rock band called Leroy Justice, named after a college friend's father, and there is something about the rhythmic and improvisational quality of musical performance that carries over into how he inhabits characters. November's sharp wit and comedic edge in the film are largely Kelly's own contribution, the organic result of an actor who genuinely enjoys the lighter dimensions of his character and does not feel the need to manufacture seriousness in a role that does not demand it. The physical demands of Ghost War also created their share of unplanned comedy. Action sequences involving trained stunt performers, wire rigging, and carefully choreographed fight scenes are, in the moments between takes, among the most inherently absurd spectacles imaginable. Grown adults in various states of tactical gear, covered in fake blood and sweat, waiting while an elaborate stunt is reset for the 7th time, tend toward gallows humor as a coping mechanism. The London car chase, which took months to plan and was described as super difficult to execute, involved enormous amounts of waiting time between actual filming moments, waiting that Krasinski, a man biologically incapable of sitting quietly for long periods, would have filled in entirely characteristic fashion. Sienna Miller, joining the group as a relative newcomer to this particular franchise family, has spoken in interviews about the warmth with which she was received by the existing cast. The dynamic she brings as Emma Marlowe, sharp, controlled, quietly amused by the chaos around her, apparently mirrors her own personality on set to a significant degree. Miller is someone who has spent her entire career in high-pressure productions surrounded by serious dramatic actors, and she has always navigated those environments with a British composure that tends to find the absurdity in any situation rather than being overwhelmed by it. What emerges from everything that is known about the making of Ghost War is a production that was simultaneously enormously expensive, logistically staggering, technically demanding, and genuinely enjoyable for the people making it. $100 million is a serious commitment, and London and Dubai are serious locations, and Liam Crown is a serious villain, and the themes of the film are genuinely weighty. But the people at the center of it are, at the end of the day, a group of highly skilled professionals who have spent years together, who trust each other completely, and who find each other genuinely funny. That combination of seriousness and levity is precisely what makes the Mike November moments in the finished film land the way they do, and why the scenes between Ryan and Greer carry emotional weight that goes beyond the script itself. The $100 million bought the locations, the stunts, the music, the visual scale. But the energy that makes Ghost War feel alive and inhabited, the chemistry between Krasinski, Pierce, Kelly, and Miller, the sense that these people genuinely enjoy each other's company, that came for free. It was already there, built over years of working together and laughing together, and no budget in the world can manufacture it if it does not already exist between the people standing in front of the camera. The cultural and historical world of Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War. To fully understand what Ghost War is, what it represents, and why it resonates or provokes the reactions it does, you cannot simply watch it as a standalone action film. You have to understand where it comes from, the literary tradition, the historical moment, the cultural anxieties, and the decades of American storytelling that it is both built upon and in conversation with. Ghost War did not appear out of nowhere. It is the latest expression of a mythology that began in the early 1980s and has never stopped evolving, because the fears and questions it explores have never stopped being relevant. Tom Clancy was born in Baltimore, Maryland, in 1947, and he grew up in the specific cultural atmosphere of Cold War America, a country defined by the permanent and omnipresent awareness that the Soviet Union existed as a rival superpower capable of nuclear annihilation. The Cold War shaped everything about American public life from the late 1940s through the early 1990s. It shaped foreign policy, domestic politics, popular culture, education, and the deep psychological identity of what it meant to be American. In that environment, the intelligence community, the CIA, the NSA, military intelligence, was not simply a government bureaucracy. It was a mythologized institution, a shadow world of brilliance and danger that stood between the American way of life and the forces that wanted to destroy it. Clancy understood the narrative power of that mythology intuitively, and in 1984 he published The Hunt for Red October, a novel about a Soviet submarine commander named Ramius who decides to defect to the United States, and the CIA analyst named Jack Ryan who becomes the crucial link between Soviet intent and American response. The novel was a sensation unlike almost anything that had happened in the thriller genre before. Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States at the time, reportedly read it in a weekend and called it the perfect yarn. That presidential endorsement was both a commercial windfall and a cultural signal. It meant that Jack Ryan was not just an entertainment figure but a political and ideological one. Clancy's novels were enthusiastically embraced by the Reagan administration and the American military-industrial establishment precisely because they portrayed American intelligence and military capability in heroic, competent, morally justified terms at a moment when the political right was aggressively reasserting American power after the perceived humiliations of the Vietnam era and the Iranian hostage crisis. Clancy was not writing propaganda in any deliberate or cynical sense. He was writing what he genuinely believed, which was that America was fundamentally good, its military and intelligence agencies were fundamentally necessary, and that the individuals within those institutions who chose duty and sacrifice over comfort were the truest kind of heroes. Jack Ryan himself was constructed as the embodiment of a very specific American ideal. He was not a superhero or a fantasy figure. He was educated, thoughtful, morally serious, physically capable but not superhuman, and above all genuinely committed to the belief that there is a right way and a wrong way to defend a democratic society. He was a former Marine officer who had been injured in a helicopter crash and recovered through sheer discipline, a man who then chose the world of intelligence analysis rather than returning to combat precisely because he believed that knowledge and understanding were more powerful weapons than guns. He was a family man who took his responsibilities seriously, who found the moral compromises of the intelligence world difficult and troubling rather than exhilarating. Clancy described Ryan as a version of himself, and specifically an improved version. That is a telling statement. It means that Jack Ryan was not a fantasy of violence and invulnerability but a fantasy of integrity. The idea that a genuinely decent man could navigate the most dangerous and morally complicated terrain in the world without losing his essential decency. The character went on to feature in 14 Clancy novels and became the centerpiece of one of the most successful franchise universes in popular culture. On the big screen, The Hunt for Red October was adapted in 1990 with Alec Baldwin in the role of Ryan, directed by John McTiernan, and it was an immediate critical and commercial triumph. Harrison Ford took over the role for Patriot Games in 1992 and Clear and Present Danger in 1994, both of which were significant hits and cemented the character's place in the pantheon of American cinema. Ben Affleck then played a younger Ryan in The Sum of All Fears in 2002, and Chris Pine took the role in the 2014 reboot Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit, which was a more modest success. Each of these films was a product of its own cultural moment, shaped by the specific anxieties and geopolitical concerns of the era in which it was made. The Hunt for Red October was a Cold War film about defection and the possibility of nuclear conflict. Patriot Games brought the IRA and domestic terrorism into the frame. Clear and Present Danger was explicitly about the war on drugs and the ethical catastrophe of covert American military operations in Colombia. The Sum of All Fears was made in the shadow of the September 11th attacks and dealt directly with nuclear terrorism. Each iteration of Jack Ryan was therefore not just an entertainment product but a cultural document, a reflection of what Americans were most afraid of and most in need of reassurance about at that particular moment in history. When Amazon Prime Video launched its television series Jack Ryan in 2018 with John Krasinski in the lead role, it faced an immediate and fundamental problem. The world that Tom Clancy had written for no longer existed. The Cold War had ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The bipolar world of superpower rivalry that gave Clancy's novels their geopolitical architecture had been replaced by something far more complex and far less narratively convenient, a multipolar world of failed states, non-state actors, transnational terrorist organizations, cyber warfare, and regional conflicts with no clear ideological stakes. The showrunners Carlton Cuse and Graham Rowland explicitly acknowledged that they could not simply adapt Clancy's novels, because the world the novels described was gone. So they preserved the spirit of the character and the essential moral framework, the thoughtful analyst thrust into danger, the commitment to doing things the right way, the tension between institutional loyalty and personal conscience, while building entirely original stories around contemporary threats. Ghost War arrives in 2026 as the latest chapter of this ongoing cultural conversation, and it plants itself directly in the most culturally significant historical moment the Jack Ryan franchise has ever grappled with, the legacy of the post-September 11th War on Terror. The film is not set during the War on Terror. It is set in the aftermath of it, at a point in history where the decisions made in the heat and panic and moral urgency of the immediate post-9/11 period are now old enough to have consequences, contradictions, and regrets that demand a reckoning. The central historical reality that Ghost War builds its entire narrative on is the documented and extensively studied fact that in the years immediately following September 11, 2001, the American and British intelligence communities made decisions that they have spent the subsequent 2 decades either defending, walking back, or quietly trying to forget. The attacks of September 11 created a specific and overwhelming political and institutional pressure, the absolute demand that another attack of that magnitude must never happen again, whatever that required. In that environment, the existing frameworks of legal oversight, intelligence protocols, international law, and democratic accountability were treated by many as inconvenient obstacles rather than necessary protections. Extraordinary rendition, the practice of secretly transferring suspects to countries where they could be interrogated using methods that American law prohibited, became official CIA policy. Enhanced interrogation techniques, which critics argue plainly constituted torture under international law, were authorized at the highest levels of government. Black sites, detention facilities that operated entirely outside the framework of any legal system, were established in countries around the world. Covert operations that bypassed congressional oversight and normal chains of accountability were launched on the authority of executive orders that were themselves classified. Ghost War's villain Liam Crown and his rogue Black Ops unit Starling are a direct fictional expression of this real historical period. Starling was created in the immediate aftermath of September 11 by Greer and Crown precisely because the normal channels of intelligence work seemed too slow, too constrained, and too burdened by legal and institutional red tape to effectively counter a threat that moved with the speed and adaptability of global terrorism. This is not a fictional invention. It is an almost exact description of the actual logic that drove the creation of real post-9/11 programs and units within the CIA, the NSA, and the broader American national security apparatus. The film is asking audiences to sit with a question that real historians and ethicists and intelligence professionals have been wrestling with for more than 2 decades. What happens when the methods you adopt in the name of security become, themselves, a form of the danger you were trying to prevent? What is the true cost of operating outside the law in the name of protecting the law? Greer's decision to shut down Starling 20 years before the events of the film mirrors the actual historical arc of how the American government eventually, slowly, incompletely, and often reluctantly, began to pull back from the most extreme post-9/11 measures. The Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation into CIA interrogation practices, the exposure of mass surveillance programs by Edward Snowden in 2013, the gradual closure of black sites, the ongoing legal battles over Guantanamo Bay, all of these represent the real world attempting to reckon with decisions made in the panic and urgency of September 11. Greer's moral journey in Ghost War is essentially a microcosm of that larger institutional reckoning. He helped build something he later recognized as dangerous and wrong. He made the hard decision to end it, and then he spent 2 decades living with the knowledge that his creation did not disappear simply because he closed it. It went underground. It waited. And now it has come back with a clear ideological justification for why it should be restored. Crown's plan to restart global terrorist activity in order to prove that unconstrained Black Ops units are necessary is a chilling piece of narrative logic precisely because it is not entirely irrational within the framework of his worldview. Crown is not simply evil. He is a man who has been shaped by operating in moral darkness for so long that he can no longer see the darkness for what it is. He genuinely believes that the world needs people like him doing things that cannot be named or acknowledged. This is the real cultural and historical horror that Ghost War is exploring beneath its action sequences and chase scenes. The possibility that the logic which justified post-9/11 overreach can always re-emerge, re-justify itself, and find new adherents when the fear becomes sufficient again. The rogue unit is not an anomaly. It is the shadow that intelligence agencies cast when they operate without accountability, and it can be reconstituted whenever the political will and the institutional memory exist to do so. The film is also in dialogue with a much longer cultural tradition in the spy thriller genre that long precedes Tom Clancy. The British spy novel has been one of the defining literary forms of the 20th century, shaped most powerfully by John le Carre, whose work beginning in the 1960s offered a direct counter-mythology to the clean heroism of James Bond. Where Bond was a fantasy of Western competence and moral certainty, le Carre's George Smiley and the labyrinthine world of the spy who came in from the cold, Tinker-Tailor Soldier Spy, and the rest of his Carla trilogy were exercises in institutional corruption, moral ambiguity, personal betrayal, and the devastating human cost of operating in a world where there is no clean side to be on. Le Carre's novels articulated a distinctly British Cold War anxiety, the suspicion, thoroughly validated by the actual history of the Cambridge Five spy ring, that the institutions supposed to protect the country were themselves infiltrated, compromised, and operating in self-serving ways that had nothing to do with the national interest they claimed to serve. Ghost War absorbs some of this tradition through its London setting and its use of MI6 as a key institutional backdrop. The revelation that Andrew Spear, a senior MI6 figure, is working as an inside man for Crown is a direct gesture toward the historical reality of institutional betrayal that shaped the British intelligence mythology. The Cambridge Five, Kim Philby, Guy Burgess, Donald Maclean, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross, were Soviet moles who penetrated the highest levels of British intelligence during and after World War II and spent decades passing secrets to Moscow. When their betrayal was finally and conclusively confirmed in the 1960s and beyond, it produced a crisis not just of security but of institutional identity that British culture has never fully processed. The possibility that the person sitting across from you in the intelligence conference room is working for the other side is not a paranoid fantasy in the British context. It is documented historical fact, and Ghost War draws on that history to give Emma Marlowe's confrontation with Spear's betrayal a cultural weight that resonates far beyond the immediate plot. The film's use of Dubai as a primary location is itself a culturally and historically significant choice. Dubai is one of the most extraordinary urban phenomena of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, a city that barely existed 50 years ago, built almost entirely with oil wealth and migrant labor into one of the most spectacular concentrations of architectural ambition and financial power on the planet. It is also a city that exists in one of the most geopolitically complex regions in the world, in the middle of the Persian Gulf, surrounded by the competing interests of Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar, and the broader currents of Middle Eastern politics that have shaped the post-Cold War global order. Dubai has become, in the cultural imagination of Western thriller fiction and cinema, a kind of neutral territory, a place where spies and arms dealers and intelligence operatives from every country can operate, a city with enormous wealth and sophisticated infrastructure and simultaneously almost no legacy of the kind of democratic civic culture that makes accountability possible. The choice to set key action sequences there connects Ghost War to a lineage of post-9/11 thrillers that have used the Gulf states as settings for stories about the blurring of legal and illegal, official and unofficial, state-sponsored and deniable. The broader cultural conversation that Ghost War is positioned within is the ongoing and unresolved American and British debate about the proper relationship between security and liberty, between institutional power and democratic accountability, between the pragmatic demands of protecting a population from genuine threats and the constitutional and moral principles that define what that population is supposed to be protecting. This debate has been at the center of Western political culture for the entire post-9/11 period, and it shows no sign of resolution because the tensions it reflects are not resolvable by simple political will. They are structural tensions that arise from the nature of democratic governance in an era of non-state threats. Ghost War also participates in a specifically American cultural tradition of what might be called the reluctant hero mythology. Jack Ryan does not want to be a spy. He never wanted to be a spy. He wanted to be an academic, then a financial analyst, then a comfortable civilian living at an appropriate distance from the world of danger and moral compromise that intelligence work requires. Every version of the Jack Ryan story begins with this reluctance, because the reluctance is culturally and ideologically essential. It is the feature that distinguishes Ryan from the amoral or self-interested figures that populate other corners of the spy genre. His service is genuine sacrifice precisely because he does not seek it. He is drafted by duty rather than attracted by adventure or reward. This narrative structure connects Ryan to a very deep current in American mythology: the yeoman farmer who becomes a soldier when the Republic requires it, the frontier settler who takes up arms when the community is threatened, the ordinary citizen whose fundamental decency is the thing that makes them extraordinary when circumstances demand it. This mythology has been contested and complicated throughout American cultural history, and Ghost War adds its own complications. The film explicitly acknowledges, through Greer's backstory and the Starling program, that even genuinely decent and committed people who start from a place of authentic patriotism and moral seriousness can build institutions and make decisions that become dangerous and wrong. The road to Starling was presumably paved with good intentions. This is the historical and moral truth that the film is sitting with, and it is a more honest and more culturally sophisticated acknowledgement than much of the Jack Ryan franchise has offered before. The cultural moment of 2026 in which Ghost War was released is also worth understanding. The film arrives at a point when the streaming revolution has fundamentally transformed how prestige storytelling is distributed and consumed. The fact that a $100 million spy thriller went directly to Amazon Prime Video rather than cinemas is itself a historically significant development, one that Amazon explicitly positioned as a demonstration that streaming platforms no longer need theatrical exclusivity to achieve cultural impact or commercial ambition. This is the latest expression of a disruption that has been reshaping the entertainment industry for more than a decade, and Ghost War is one of the highest-profile data points in that ongoing story. What makes Ghost War culturally rich, whatever its narrative limitations, is that it carries all of this history within it. The Cold War origins of Tom Clancy's America, the post-9/11 reckoning with what was done in the name of security, the British tradition of institutional betrayal, the American mythology of reluctant heroism, the global geography of contemporary power and its shadows, and the streaming era's rewriting of how stories reach audiences. It is a film that is embedded in its moment and in its lineage simultaneously, and understanding both makes the experience of watching it considerably more layered than the action sequences and spy tradecraft alone would suggest. Here is the complete and lengthy breakdown of the ironic historical details surrounding Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War, written cleanly in paragraphs. The ironic historical details of Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War. There is a particular kind of irony that only history can produce, not the cheap, scripted kind that a writer constructs for effect, but the deep, structural kind that builds itself quietly over decades until suddenly the contradictions are so obvious and so perfectly arranged that they demand to be acknowledged. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War is surrounded by exactly this kind of irony. Layer after layer of it. The more closely you examine the real history behind this film, behind its creator, its franchise, the platform delivering it, and the very themes it explores, the more you find yourself confronted with a set of contradictions so enormous and so perfectly arranged that they would be rejected as too on the nose if any screenwriter tried to invent them. Let us begin with the most foundational irony of all, the one that sits at the very root of everything the Jack Ryan franchise is and has ever been. Tom Clancy was an insurance salesman from Maryland. He had no military experience whatsoever. He had never served in the armed forces, never worked in intelligence, never set foot inside a CIA facility, never been briefed on classified operations, never participated in any aspect of the American national security apparatus in any professional capacity at any point in his life. He was an insurance agent who was fascinated by military technology and naval history, who spent 15 years obsessively reading publicly available journals, technical manuals, Naval Institute proceedings, and open-source military literature that was never intended to be synthesized the way Clancy synthesized it. And then, in 1984, he sat down and wrote The Hunt for Red October, a novel so technically accurate in its description of classified naval procedures, so precisely detailed in its account of submarine warfare tactics and operational protocols, that within a year of its publication the Secretary of the Navy himself told Clancy at a White House lunch that if he were a naval officer, he would have him court-martialed for all the classified information in his book. The secretary then clarified that the truly astonishing thing was that Clancy had not actually accessed any classified information. He had simply read everything available to anyone and assembled it with such precision that the result was indistinguishable from a classified briefing document. Here is the irony. The man who created the single most famous fictional American intelligence analyst in history, the man who spent decades writing about the inner workings of the CIA, the NSA, the U.S. military, and the entire American national security apparatus with an authority that made readers and officials alike assume he must be on the inside, had never been on the inside. The great chronicler of American intelligence was a civilian insurance salesman reading library books. Jack Ryan, the genius analyst who always had the crucial piece of information no one else could find, was invented by a man who had never been a genius analyst but was simply very good at finding information no one else had bothered to assemble. The character was, in a way, Clancy's idealized projection of what he himself was doing, reading everything publicly available with obsessive attention to detail and synthesizing it into something that felt classified. He created the perfect fictional version of his own actual methodology. And then Reagan read the book and called it the perfect yarn, and overnight Clancy went from insurance agent to best-selling novelist. This is the man whose name appears in the title of a $100 million Amazon film in 2026. He died in 2013, never having held a security clearance, having built his entire career on the publicly available record. The second great irony sits one layer deeper and is considerably darker. After the hunt for Red October made Clancy famous, something remarkable happened. The American intelligence and military establishment, which had initially been alarmed by how accurately he had reconstructed classified procedures from public sources, decided that the smarter move was not to distance themselves from him but to embrace him. Clancy was, as he later described it in his own words, adopted by the United States Army and the U.S. and British navies. Senior officials opened doors for him. He was given access to submarines, aircraft carriers, military installations, and intelligence facilities that ordinary civilians could never visit. He was allowed to interview intelligence officers and military commanders who guided his research. The CIA's Director of Central Intelligence, William Webster, publicly praised him at exclusive events. A future CIA director, Robert Gates, told a young Clancy after the publication of Red October that he was probably going to write another book or two. Years later, Clancy told Gates that he had modeled Jack Ryan's career arc on Gates' own. The man who would become the director of the CIA served, without apparently having offered explicit consent, as the biographical template for the most famous fictional CIA analyst in history. The establishment that had been alarmed by how accurately Clancy was reconstructing their classified world from public sources solved the problem by letting him inside. They reasoned correctly that a Clancy who was friendly and grateful and who portrayed them heroically was far more valuable to them than a Clancy who was hostile. And so they helped him. They gave him access, they answered his questions, they reviewed his manuscripts. The CIA's Office of Public Affairs received an advance copy of the Cardinal of the Kremlin from Clancy himself, who asked them to check it for possible classified information, a novelist voluntarily submitting his work for intelligence agency vetting. The agency responded by praising the book. This is the relationship at the heart of the Jack Ryan franchise. The novelist who made the CIA look brilliant and heroic was rewarded with access that made the CIA look even more brilliant and heroic in subsequent novels. It was a circle of mutual benefit so perfectly arranged that it required no explicit agreement or coordination to function. Now here is where the irony of Ghost War specifically enters. The Amazon Prime Video television series Jack Ryan, which ran from 2018 to 2023 and which Ghost War directly continues, was the first television production in several years to film on location at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The CIA cooperated directly with the show's production, with researchers using Freedom of Information Act requests later documenting that CIA consultants shaped scripts, reviewed storylines, and influenced the show's portrayal of the agency's work. The CIA's Entertainment Industry Liaison Office, which has existed in various forms since the 1990s and which grants or withholds cooperation with Hollywood productions based on whether they portray the agency favorably, was deeply involved with the show. And at the end of every single episode of the television series, a disclaimer appeared stating that the show was not affiliated with or endorsed by the Central Intelligence Agency. The disclaimer was technically accurate in a narrow legal sense. The deeper truth, documented through government records, was considerably more complicated. The supreme irony that this creates for Ghost War is almost too perfectly constructed to be real. Ghost War is a film whose central plot is about the dangers of intelligence agencies operating without oversight, transparency, and accountability. Its villain created a black ops unit that operated in secret, outside the law, with no democratic accountability and no public knowledge of its existence. The film's moral argument, such as it is, rests on the claim that this is wrong, that the CIA must operate within boundaries, that accountability matters, that power exercised in secret without oversight becomes dangerous regardless of its original intentions. This is the film's explicit message, delivered through its protagonist and its narrative resolution. And this film was made with the documented cooperation and involvement of the actual Central Intelligence Agency, distributed by a company that holds a $600 million cloud computing contract with the CIA, produced for a platform owned by Jeff Bezos, who also owns the Washington Post, a newspaper that has historically relied significantly on CIA sources and whose relationship with the American intelligence community is a subject of considerable scholarly and journalistic attention. Ghost War is a film about the necessity of CIA accountability and oversight, produced in cooperation with an agency that operates with limited public accountability and distributed through infrastructure partly funded by CIA contracts. It is a film warning audiences about the dangers of intelligence operations conducted without transparency, brought to them by a commercial arrangement that involves the CIA at multiple levels. The ironies do not cancel each other out. They simply coexist, which is precisely what makes them ironic rather than merely contradictory. The third layer of irony belongs to Tom Clancy personally, and it concerns the strange relationship between his fictional universe and the actual history of the things he was writing about. Clancy spent his career portraying the CIA as a fundamentally good institution staffed by dedicated and principled professionals who were constrained by bureaucracy and politics but whose essential mission was just and whose methods were, by the standards of the spy thriller genre, restrained and ethical. Jack Ryan specifically was constructed as the conscience of the intelligence world, the analyst who refused to cross lines, who insisted on doing things the right way, who served as the moral anchor of an institution that needed one. The entire franchise is built on the premise that the CIA, properly led and properly overseen, is a force for genuine good in the world. The actual history of the CIA during the Cold War period that Clancy was writing about and romanticizing includes the following documented facts. The agency was deeply involved in the overthrow of the democratically elected Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. It organized and supported the overthrow of the democratically elected Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz in 1954. It planned and executed the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, which was a catastrophic failure that embarrassed the United States internationally and contributed to the conditions that produced the Cuban Missile Crisis. It operated MKUltra, a program of illegal experimentation on American and Canadian citizens without their knowledge or consent, involving the use of LSD, hypnosis, and other techniques to explore possibilities of mind control. It was involved in assassination plots against foreign leaders including Fidel Castro. It conducted mass surveillance of American citizens through domestic programs that were illegal under U.S. law. The Church Committee investigations of 1975 and 1976 documented these activities in extensive detail, and produced a public reckoning with the agency's conduct that remains one of the most significant moments of congressional oversight in American history. Clancy began writing his romanticized version of the CIA in 1984, 9 years after the Church Committee had documented all of this in the public record. He was not writing in ignorance of what the CIA had actually done. He was writing a conscious alternative mythology, a version of what the CIA could be and should be, populated by characters like Jack Ryan who represented what its practitioners ought to aspire to. Ghost War, in 2026, is the latest chapter of that same alternative mythology. It is a story about how a rogue black ops unit that operated without oversight became dangerous, told by a franchise that has spent 4 decades declining to engage seriously with the documented history of how the actual CIA operated without oversight and became dangerous. The fictional CIA of Ghost War eventually recognizes its mistakes and corrects them. The historical record of the actual CIA is considerably more complicated than that narrative resolution. The fourth irony belongs to John Krasinski specifically, and it is one of those biographical coincidences that feels almost designed. Krasinski grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, and attended Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. He was a committed and serious student of English literature who also trained with the Royal Shakespeare Company. He then moved to New York and, famously, worked as a waiter while pursuing auditions and nearly decided to become a schoolteacher. His entire professional identity for the first decade of his fame was built around Jim Halpert, the most non-threatening, relatable, warmly human character in the recent history of American television comedy. Jim Halpert's defining characteristic is his fundamental decency and his quiet, amused resistance to the absurdity of institutional life. He is someone the audience roots for precisely because he is clearly too good for the environment he is trapped in, too honest and too human to fully commit to the particular brand of corporate performance that surrounds him. And then Krasinski became Jack Ryan, the man who takes up arms to defend the institutional values of the CIA, who ultimately accepts the position of deputy director of that institution in the film's closing moments, who chooses in the film's climax to execute a wounded and defenseless man with a cold deliberateness that the film presents as a mark of moral evolution rather than moral failure. The man who built his career playing the decent everyman who resisted institutional conformity ended up playing the most celebrated defender of American institutional power in contemporary popular entertainment. The character who made audiences love him because he would not submit to the absurdity of Dunder Mifflin eventually became the character who submits completely to the CIA and is rewarded for it with one of the most powerful positions in the American government. Jim Halpert would have looked directly at the camera, paused, and let the audience sit with the discomfort of that. The fifth irony is perhaps the most structurally perfect of all, and it concerns the character of James Greer and his relationship to Clear and Present Danger, the 1994 film with Harrison Ford. In that film, the James Greer character, played by James Earl Jones, nominates Jack Ryan for the position of Deputy Director of Intelligence. In Ghost War, the James Greer character, played by Wendell Pierce, nominates Jack Ryan for the same position. The franchise has circled back to its own most famous institutional moment, and replayed it, presenting it as a satisfying payoff and a return to origins. The film is consciously echoing its own franchise history and inviting audiences to feel the emotional weight of that echo. But here is the irony embedded in that echo. Clear and Present Danger, the film this moment is designed to recall, was a story about illegal American covert military operations in Colombia, a government-sanctioned black ops campaign conducted without congressional knowledge or approval, designed to assassinate drug cartel leaders outside any legal framework. The film's Jack Ryan spends the entire movie uncovering this illegal operation and attempting to end it and expose it. He is the man who insists that even drug lords cannot be killed by American military assets operating outside the law. He is the moral voice arguing for accountability and legal constraint against an administration that has decided the ends justify the means. Ghost War replays the emotional climax of that film, Ryan being nominated for deputy director. But this time Ryan has just executed a wounded man and is heading into the CIA to run it. The institutional reward for both Ryans is identical. The actions that preceded each reward are considerably different. The franchise presents these two moments as parallel expressions of the same fundamental Ryan character, and in doing so reveals, perhaps unintentionally, how much the definition of what a good CIA man does has shifted between 1994 and 2026, even within the comfortable mythology of a franchise that has always wanted to portray the agency at its most principled. The sixth irony is a commercial one, and it is the one that the 21st century has made unavoidable. Ghost War is distributed by Amazon MGM Studios and delivered to audiences through Amazon Prime Video. Amazon Web Services, the cloud computing division of Amazon, holds a 10-year, approximately $600 million contract with the CIA to provide cloud computing infrastructure for American intelligence agencies. This contract has been public knowledge since 2013 and has been extensively reported on. Jeff Bezos, who founded Amazon and whose personal wealth is directly tied to Amazon's performance, also owns the Washington Post through Nash Holdings. The Washington Post has a historically complex relationship with the American intelligence community, having relied significantly on intelligence community sources for its reporting over decades and having published reporting that has been criticized by some observers as being influenced by access arrangements with the agencies it covers. Ghost War is therefore a film about the importance of CIA accountability, produced for a platform whose parent company earns hundreds of millions of dollars from CIA contracts. This is not a conspiracy or a secret arrangement. It is simply the commercial reality of how the entertainment industry and the national security state interlock in 21st century America. Amazon benefits enormously from its relationship with the CIA through its cloud computing business. Amazon also distributes entertainment that critiques rogue CIA operations and argues for greater institutional accountability. These two facts coexist without apparent discomfort on anyone's part, which is itself a remarkable piece of historical irony, the corporation arguing, through its entertainment arm, for greater accountability of an institution whose infrastructure contracts help make it one of the most valuable companies in human history. The seventh irony is a generational one and perhaps the most quietly devastating. Ghost War's villain Liam Crown genuinely believes that the kind of unconstrained black ops operation he ran was necessary, effective, and morally justified by its results. He believes that men like Greer, who shut Starling down in the name of institutional principles and legal constraint, were dangerously naive. And the film asks its audience to understand, on some level, that Crown is not simply evil. He is a man shaped by a specific historical experience into a position of terrifying certainty. His conviction is the product of decades of operating in a world where normal moral frameworks had been suspended by institutional necessity. The real historical irony is that Crown's position, that the severity of the threat justifies the suspension of normal legal and ethical constraints, was not a fringe view held only by rogue operatives. It was official American government policy for the better part of a decade after September 11th. The architects of enhanced interrogation, extraordinary rendition, mass surveillance, and extrajudicial killing were not rogue agents operating outside the system. They were the system. They held the highest offices in the American government, received legal cover from the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, were briefed to congressional leadership through controlled disclosure processes, and operated with the full knowledge and authorization of multiple branches of government. The Liam Crown position, that extreme circumstances justify extreme measures outside the normal legal framework, was not the position of a villain in the early 2000s. It was the position of the Vice President of the United States. Ghost War processes this history by containing it within a villain who has gone rogue, which allows the CIA as an institution to emerge from the film as the heroic force that stops the threat. The real historical lesson of the post-September 11th period is that the threat did not come from men who had gone rogue from the institutional system. It came from men who were the institutional system, making authorized decisions that the institutional system later chose to partially disavow when the political and legal consequences became impossible to ignore. The film's architecture requires a villain who stands outside the institution so that the institution can remain the hero. History, characteristically, was less accommodating. All of these ironies coexist within Ghost War and within the broader Jack Ryan franchise without any of them being explicitly acknowledged by the films themselves. The franchise has never been interested in that level of self-examination, and Ghost War is no exception. It is a film that is genuinely trying to engage with serious questions about institutional accountability and the legacy of post-September 11th decision-making, and it does so with more honesty than most entertainment at this budget level would attempt. But it is also a film produced within commercial arrangements and institutional relationships that make it structurally unable to fully follow those questions to their most uncomfortable conclusions. The result is a film that is more historically layered and more ironically situated than its action sequences suggest, and considerably less willing to live inside those ironies than the real history they draw on would demand. That gap between what the film acknowledges and what the real history contains is not a failure unique to Ghost War. It is the defining characteristic of the entire 42-year history of the Jack Ryan franchise. A mythology built on the irony of an insurance salesman romanticizing an institution whose actual history is considerably less romantic than the stories he told about it, stories that the institution itself happily helped him tell. That is the full ironical historical picture surrounding Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Ghost War. If you found this video genuinely interesting and worth your time, please give it a like because it helps the channel grow more than you might think. Share it with someone who thinks deeply about history and culture and will appreciate every layer of what we just went through together. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single video. We will see you in the next one.